Once upon a time, there was a magical land known as Great Britain. Britain was a land of plenty, one of the richest on the planet. There was more than enough to go round. Unfortunately, Britain was teeming with crooks, cronies and bellends, most of whom had been elected into government. So despite Britain being a land of plenty, occasionally it appeared that things were beginning to run out. In early 2020, the fifth richest land on the planet seemingly ran out of bog roll, as shitty-arsed panic buyers filled their trolleys with more crap paper than would even be needed by an IBS support group who'd eaten nothing but raw chicken and prunes for a week. It even appeared that food was running out for some. Indeed, surely the greatest illusion that the British government ever pulled off was to convince us that people visiting food banks in the fifth richest country on the planet was completely normal. What a bunch of Thankfully, there were several things that Great Britain would never run out of, namely pound shops, morons, and bent politicians. But one day, the petrol ran out. The government told the people of Britain not to panic. So naturally, everyone panicked. Those fuckers in power had been wrong about literally everything else, so it seemed entirely correct to completely ignore them. Long lines formed outside garage forecourts. Babies were conceived, born, and grew up knowing nothing but sitting in a petrol queue. But not only were people unable to get petrol, there were other effects too. Without petrol, Jeremy Clarkson and his two gimpy friends had to get proper jobs in the hospitality industry. The price of train tickets shot up. Luckily, they'd been fucking astronomical for years, so nobody even noticed. And worst of all, people who owned electric cars became even more nauseatingly smug than usual, if that's possible. But the problem wasn't a lack of petrol, not really. It was a lack of drivers, specifically foreign drivers. Foreign drivers who'd been chased out of the country following Britain's brave decision to take back control. And despite Britain definitely taking back control, there now appeared to be even less control than ever before, in a twist so ironic it would have made Alanis Morissette shit her pants. In fact, Britain was now wielding this newfound control as effectively as a toddler who'd been given the keys to an Apache helicopter. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, a man who couldn't organise a gangbang in a brothel, told Britons to behave normally, while the rest of his cabinet behaved like those naughty fuckers off Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The rest of the government blamed other people. They were good at that. They blamed other people for everything, seemingly forgetting that they had been the ones in power for over a decade. The petrol union blamed the government, and Boris Johnson, running out of options, blamed it on the boogie. But still, there was no petrol. And thus it appeared that despite all the rhetoric and thinly veiled racism, this great country of Britain did indeed need immigrants in order to function. And the hasty closing of borders and removal of migrant workers had left the UK resembling a feckless lunatic who'd cut off his own fingers and then tried to play the piano. Britain's government panicked and decided to let these immigrants back in, but this time without any healthcare, employment protection, or basic human rights. The leaders of Great Britain were sure that anyone lucky enough to be merely invited to this great magical land would happily crawl over broken glass and dog shit just to breathe in this great British air. But the immigrants, who'd been hounded out of the country for no other reason than sounding slightly different, told Britain to fuck right off. Most European lorry drivers didn't like the sound of spending yet another Christmas sandwiched in a piss-stenched car park in the arse end of Kent. And as queues at petrol stations continued to grow, the entire economy collapsed. But the people of Britain refused to let this get them down. On the contrary, they rejoiced, because after all, they had taken back control. They no longer had a functioning economy, but they had something far more important: their sovereignty and their beautiful blue passports. Good night.